D Rose was, like I said, when people ask me who the hardest guy I ever had to guard, I tell them that D Rose was the toughest guy.
The fear that he put in people who played against him, the top guys, I would see fear in their eyes all the time. He was quiet, but he was a killer.
I mean, he had everything.
Everything.
He had everything. Athleticism, handles, quickness, could shoot, could get to the basket. He had everything.
Everything.
You felt like anytime, like Derek on the floor, there was hope.
There was rarely a player you could throw this many labels on him. The youngest MVP, one-hit wonder, a flop, criminally underrated, a comet, immortal. Those 3,700 minutes in 2011 were his only healthy season during his peak. To be fair, it wasn't even his peak, it was just a sneak peek of what kind of unbelievable feat he might be able to accomplish in a future that doesn't exist. As we all know, disaster struck shortly after. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. For many of the basketball nerds like myself, scrolling down Basketball Reference page and looking at the numbers Rose and LeBron put up respectively in 2011, it was hard to justify Rose's MVP case that year in hindsight. Especially when you consider the overwhelming voting results favoring Rose with 113 first-place votes, while LeBron had only 4. You would have thought it was at least evenly matched. Nowadays, the consensus among fans is that the MVP trophy was stolen from the king due to people being a prisoner of the moment. We were all captivated by a third-year point guard with the most eye-catching style outperforming a super team. Narrative-wise, for the majority of the MVP voters who were sports writers, the sudden rise of Rose was a way fresher and more appealing story to write about than anything James got to offer. In fact, we can all appreciate a good story. But maybe we all have been mistaken. I believe Derrick Rose rightfully deserved the MVP award. He was doing things people just didn't think was possible to dominate the basketball game, especially at his size. He played the game in a way we all wish we could play. Ultimately, stats were nothing but approximation of the player's value. It wasn't some truthful depiction of a player's real impact on the game. Rose's presence on the floor was far beyond his numbers might indicate. Before Rose's meteoric rise, before all the limelight and superstar buzz, Rose was a quiet and humble kid who grew up with a single mom and 3 older brothers. He spent his childhood in poverty in the city's Inglewood neighborhood, infested by drugs, violence, and crime. But none of it could slow down the young Derrick Rose. Rose might be quiet, but he did all his talking on the court. He won back-to-back city and state titles his junior and senior years in high school and was ranked the 3rd best prospect in the nation. In college, Rose had one of the greatest individual runs March Madness had ever seen. In 6 NCAA tournament games, Rose averaged 20.8 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 6 assists, while shooting 51.8% from the field. It shifted the momentum and gave him the upper hand in the race against Michael Beasley for the number 1 pick in the draft. As an NBA player, the Chicago native hit the ground running. By the end of his rookie campaign, the city of Chicago had already fallen in love with the hometown kid.
Why not? Why can't I be the MVP of the league? Why can't I be the best player in the league? I don't see why. Why?
It didn't take him too long to make a name for himself. By his 3rd season, Rose had already carried the team on his back by averaging 25 points and 7.7 assists. His emergence as one of the best players in the world catapulted the Bulls from a fringe playoff team to a title contender in the East. For many fans in Chicago who had been devoid of success since Jordan's era, Rose was the savior who brought the Bulls out of the lost decade and into the promised land. On the court, he was a walking highlight reel. He had some of the best dribble package, the spin move, the dazzling double crossover, the hand dribble, you name it, D-Rose probably had it. Rose could not be contained by any lead defenders or even two. Nobody knew how to guard this guy. According to Eric Spoelstra, he had his entire game plan in Miami revolve around Rose to slow him down. He was always the fastest guy on the floor. Nobody could stay in front of him. You saw him blow by some of the best perimeter defenders in the league on a nightly basis. When it was a pick and roll, he just simply knifed right between both defenders. He was a master of getting angles and edges on defenders that he made it look effortless. When he was under the basket, he had a layup package that allowed him to finish with both hands proficiently. After Rose leaves his feet, he can contort his body in a way that almost defies laws of physics while maintaining body control. He instilled fear into opponents' hearts, and they were actively running away from him. There was a unique sickness known as the Rose flu. People were faking getting sick to avoid taking on Rose in his prime. Rose was also uniquely underrated as a playmaker. His lethal penetration put him in advantageous position to open up the floor by drawing double and triple team. When the opposing interior defense collapsed on his drives, it would leave Joakim Noah and Taj Gibson free in the post. He might not wow you with flashy passes, but the unstoppable nature of his scoring made most of his assists look too easy. As a player, Rose was the complete package. He was one of the most popular players in the league, and nobody was as universally loved as Derrick Rose.
Is the D-Rose flu a real thing?
People used to get the D-Rose flu?
Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
Man, people was getting the D-Rose flu. Cass was, when he would come to town, Cass ain't even want to play. Cass was like, oh, D-Rose playing, I'm feeling some tendonitis. Oh.
It was crazy how many people was getting sick when it was time to play Chicago.
Meanwhile, during that season, he met somebody who was instrumental in both the success and destruction of his career. Before his MVP season, Rose already had a few good years under his belt. But it wasn't until his first season coached by Thibodeau that he blossomed into a superstar. Thibodeau was one of, if not the largest driving factor responsible for Rose's rapid rise. Under Tom Thibodeau, Rose became a much improved defender. His defensive scheme, which relies heavily on playing help defense, played to Rose's strength as an athlete. D-Rose had always been a straight bucket getter, but it was Thibodeau who recognized Rose's ability to lead the offense as a primary ball handler and made him the center of the scheme. Rose was in charge of everything on that end of the floor, with his usage rate jumped from 27.2% to 32.2%. Even after he left the Bulls, the two would reunite in both Manhattan and Minnesota. Tom Thibodeau had always been the coach Rose trusted the most. And vice versa, Thibodeau was also one of the very few who was willing to give Rose a chance even when the entire league had turned its back on him. There was no way Rose could prolong his career to his mid and late 30s if not for Thibodeau's unconditional support.
But his coach has done what he's supposed to do. Right. Thibodeau has rolled with D-Rose because D-Rose put him on. So every chance Thibodeau got to put him on, who is he gonna call? I'm gonna call Derrick Rose.
Chicago Bulls, with its young core of Rose, Noah, Lord Den, Taj Gibson, was looking to be a threat to the finals for years to come. However, everything came to a halt on April 28, 2012. Late in Game 1 between Chicago and Philadelphia in the first round of the playoff, Rose blew by his defender like he always did. But when he planted his left leg on the floor for a layup, his left knee instantaneously exploded into pieces, more specifically, an ACL tear without contact. His health struggle was then exacerbated by another pair of tears in his right knee in 2013 and 15, and a tear to his left knee in 2017. By the time he made it back from this plethora of lower leg injuries, his trademark explosiveness had long gone and was close to non-existent. The fear of it happening had always been living in the back of our collective conscious mind. People constantly felt afraid watching him throw his body in the air and land on the ground in awkward fashions. Or maybe the injury was a complete fluke. If Thibodeau didn't make the questionable decision of keeping him on the floor with only 70 seconds left while leading by 12, this career-altering injury would never happen. No matter what, it certainly happened too soon. It was way too brutal for such a devastating injury to happen to him this early in his career.
So playing against the 76ers during that time, and yeah, a lot of people say, hey, you know what, why was Derek in the game? And, you know, I would ask the question too. And I'm thinking to myself, like, come on, Tibbs, got to get him out the game. You got to get your best player off the floor.
Rose will be forever remembered as one of the biggest what if. What if he chose to sit out the last minute of the game? What if he chose to defer to his teammates on that play? But those what ifs simply don't matter, because all we're left with was the shattered reality that Rose will never be the same.
So a lot of people may look at my story and be like, man, he's the biggest what if, blah, blah, blah. You right.
The NBA was littered with tragic tales like this. Bill Walton, Sam Bowie, Grant Hill, Brandon Roy, Greg Oden, the list goes on and on. Some of them made it back, but most never did. The rehab room was jammed with broken heroes. Rose did his best to avoid becoming one of them. He used to be deemed as the savior who could bring the franchise back to its glory days by fans in Chicago. But many of them turned their back on him. They even questioned Rose on his delayed return to the court. It was heartbreaking to watch everything being taken away from him at the apex of his career. He went from the top of the pecking order to somewhere way down the depth chart. He never came close to replicating his MVP season performance when he was only 22. It took a real man to swallow his pride and take that reality pill.
Everybody go through adversity in their life. It's all about how you take on that adversity.
That shit made me who I am, man.
In October 2024, the 35-year-old veteran, 5 stops removed from his heyday in Chicago, quietly announced his retirement. Back in 2011, when the 22-year-old Derrick Rose was at the peak of his powers, nobody would have believed you if you suggested that he would spend the rest of his career bouncing around the league, backing up non-all-star teammates in search of playing time. Meanwhile, knowing all of the setbacks and mishaps Rose had to battle through to get back on the floor, he had already exceeded all expectations just by avoiding retirement, let alone continuing to play 16 years into his career. For many, the career of Rose cannot be simply condensed to lines and lines of cold numbers on stat sheet. His career was an emotional journey with massive highs and devastating lows. It was a story about a superhero who has been stripped of all his superpowers and glories. His peak might be shortened by injury, but the memory, hope, and inspiration Rose brought to the city of Chicago and all of us NBA fans will live on forever.
You know, even when a superhero is knocked down, he's still a superhero at the end of the day.